Welcome. So let me see, there we go. Didn't block the post with anybody. Agile. Anybody think about that? How would you describe it to an executive in 3 bullets or left? And let me know your name when you do this. Thank you. What's your name?
Jason.
Hey, Jason. What is Agile?
What is Agile is a project management methodology that aims to deliver the features most fitted towards what the customer wants sooner rather than later, and adjust along the way as those requirements change and you learn more about the actual problem.
That's good.
That's not exactly 3 bullets, but
No, that was good. Anybody else want to add? Yes, your name? Luke.
I don't know what I
No, it was the bats. I saw them too.
I see it as sprint type stuff. Sprint based, quick, useful sprint methodology. Yeah, 2 weeks.
Yeah. Okay.
That kind of thing.
Good, good. Anybody else? One more. Thank you. What, your name?
Chris.
Chris.
It's an iterative process in which the product is changed or defined based on lessons that you learn throughout the development process, throughout developing it.
Okay, thank you. Those are all good. By the way, I agree. Those all sort of fit Agile. How many people here are doing some form of Agile methodologies in their development? Some, how many wish they were doing more? Yes. Okay, let me just tell you, there is a brewing executive rebellion against Agile. By the way, when I tried to put the word brewing in a title for another talk, they thought I meant beer. So, anyways, and this is what happened at one of my clients, because most of the executives do not care about anything you just said. Sorry about that, guys. Now, the company I'm talking about is probably, you're much closer to the executives than the companies I've been working with recently. There's a company in England called ASMPT, which has its parent in Germany, which has its parent in China. It has about 100,000 people. I've also been working in the automotive industry a little bit in Detroit with folks like GM or Continental, things like that. These are big places, so hopefully you're closer to your executives, there are more trusting relationship. But this is, I'm warning you, there is a brewing rebellion. This is what happened at one of the sites. The software lead was presenting to an executive, and the executive said, stop there. The last person that tried to explain Agile for me is looking for employment elsewhere. Did not want to hear it. So let's do a little bit back what happened. The executive basically asked, when will you be ready? And here's the answers they got. Hard to estimate. We're working in sprints. We're doing iterations. We're focused on, early value fastest. By the way, didn't care, because if I drew this matrix, which I was going to do on a flip chart, so I'll do it here like this. We can look at, by the way, some quadrants, hardware versus software only, user interface versus control software. This was a new hardware product, which this was going to be controlling software of a real-time operating system, right? That kind of stuff. So yeah, I know we're talking to the Ithaca web developers. I'm aware. Anybody here work in the hardware world, firmware too? So yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. But this is not appropriate here. Agile is effective and useful, even in these environments. But the executive needs to know when this hardware platform can launch. I've worked on nuclear submarines, I've worked in automotive, I've worked on copiers, I've worked in all sorts of things where this product is going to go with or without the software. And it's going to go on a certain date because there's millions of things coming together. They need to know when it's going to be done. The executive did not care about sprints, iterations, etc. The question wasn't being answered. So what the executive heard was, I love this, hashtag agile whining. And this is what I've heard in a lot of different of these big tier companies, that there's agile whining because they really have a specific need. Now, I want to stop for a second. What do you think the developers heard? When they heard that, and they basically, you know, were sent away. What were the developers feeling and thinking?
Maybe that executives don't understand what they do.
Correct. Was not supportive. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I heard that the developers didn't do a good enough job explaining to the executives what they really meant.
So the developers felt they didn't do a good job?
Well, as a developer, that's what I would have heard. If an executive told me that I was whining about it, I would have said I didn't do a good enough job.
Yeah, that's good. That's self-reflective, and I like that. Most developers not as enlightened as you. They should be. Because in this specific situation, this is what they thought. One, the executive is stupid. Two, the executive doesn't care about quality because he never said a freaking word about quality. Three, the executive thinks we're incompetent. They were, of course, by the way, this is going to be, you know, the 7 stages of grieving. Stunt paralysis, denial, bargaining, etc. So they were doing the first 3 stages anyways with a touch of anger. So we have to get past this. By the way, they shouldn't feel that way because the executive is paying a lot of money for these folks to develop, right? So the executive really just wanted to hear the answer to the question, when will you be done? I'm going to continue with that in a minute. Let's talk for a minute. What do executives care about? Money. Yes. Here, let's say you're going to build a house and hire people to build a house. Do you care about their methodologies? Okay. Be it in this room of geeks, you probably do. You probably do. Let me say most homeowners are not going to care whether they're using a 9-inch nails? No, I don't know this technology. You know, they won't care what kind of nails they're using and what kind of insulation, etc. We want to know whether it's going to be a highly rated insulation. They will want to know about the maintenance things. They're going to want to know about those types of things. But they're not going to care about the kind of strategy they use to manage their project, etc. You won't care. And this is what they're going to care about. They're going to care about a few critical things. Let me just note, here's the headlines just recently. Here's what executives care about. Do they care about quality? Facebook is warning some 800,000 users that a bug caused the system to unblock some people they had previously blocked. Did Facebook need any more bad news? Samsung users, did anybody see this one? Samsung users are reporting their phones are text messaging pictures to random contacts. Yeah, I'm going to be careful what pictures I take right now. Jeez. Anybody play Fortnite? Oh, just one. Cool. Fortnite playground mode was released, was pulled, and now has been re-released. So you probably more know about this. I only tried it once. I didn't have enough time to get deep into it. Fiat Chrysler recalled 1.1 million cars because people can't figure out the shifters. By the way, yeah, basically they're electronic software controlled. They get out of their car and they don't have it in park, and the software doesn't make it go into park. In my opinion, it's a requirements omission, but it's still a developer problem. Fiat Chrysler is recalling 4.8 million vehicles and telling them to stop using the cruise control immediately. because a defect could leave the driver unable to cancel the cruise control, which is very similar to the Toyota's unintended acceleration case. I don't know if anybody ever saw that one. Anybody familiar with the McCabe complexity factor? McCabe complexity factor measures the complexity of your code. If it's above 5, it's pretty bad. If it's above 10, it's untestable. The McCabe complexity factor for this piece of software was over 500. You know, on the earthquake scale, there it gets worse exponentially. Yeah. Executives care about this stuff. That costs Toyota, for example, billions of dollars. All of these things are huge problems. Anybody familiar with, I can go on and on, by the way. Mars probe crashes. Anybody meters to feet? Is that before your time? So, did you hear about that one before? Yeah, okay. The high level. Beautiful. NASA was on this faster, cheaper, better kick. Faster, cheaper, better. So they cut a lot of steps out of their quality process so they could go faster, so they could go cheaper. The better didn't work. They had two crashes of Mars probes. One crash was because one part of the system was talking in meters, which makes complete sense. It's the language of science. The other Pete was talking in feet, you know. So the two parts talking to each other, it didn't know where it was in space, and you know. The other one was a little bit more complicated than that, but basically the landing gear came down and the sensor saw the landing gear come down and said, oh, we're on the ground, and shut off the engines. The module controlling this knew that it was still a couple kilometers up. I almost said miles. So anyways, I go on the Denver luggage system. That had major delays. The delay of the luggage system, which was mostly because of software, disabled the airport from opening for over a year. They could not open the airport. And after millions of dollars of cost of maintaining that system over the next 10 years, they finally ditched the system. So, okay. I want you to know a couple things from this. Executives really want to know the answer to these 5 things. Here's my rules. And by the way, if you send me an email, I'll send you my notes so you can have this, because these 5 rules are really important. And this will, if you do this, by the way, they won't hear Agile whining. They're going to hear commitment and extreme competence, even if they do not like the answers that they hear. Got that? Even if they do not like the answers they hear. Because I think a lot of times when we're asked, when are you going to be done? I need it right away. What's your motivation? Be vague. Or my wife was an engineer too. And by the way, she's got props on me. She coded in Octal. Machine language. She had to pop things on and off the stack to be able to manage the memory. She became a stay-at-home engineer. And my first child, who Amelia's met, was a very, 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 very child. And so my wife would call me, and I would hear the crying in the background, and I hear the desperation in my wife's voice. And I was working 100-hour weeks there at Xerox on a really cool product. And she would say, what time are you going to be home? So I think about the fastest I could be there, the earliest point I could be home. That's our motivation. Because the executives are crying. They're desperate. They want us as fast as possible. Because when do they really want the product? Yeah, yesterday. So my wife is a really good manager, though, because how many times did I get home early? 0, correct. On time? No. Really late? Yeah. My wife said to this, basically, don't repeat this. She doesn't like me telling this. She said this: if you get home an hour early, a minute early, I'm delighted. You get home on time, I'm really happy. If you get home 1 minute late, well, let me just say, you pick how you want to spend your night. What she was picking on was my estimating process. She said, make a commitment you can keep or beat. Keep or beat. So here's the goals. Here's the 5 rules. 1, understand the executive's goals and situation. Makes sense. Not their requirements. I do not care if they're saying that we should have a really nice shade of orange that is highlighted with some pink outliers. I don't know. That's requirements. Don't care. What we're talking about is their goals. What are you trying to achieve? Is this about improving your profit margin? Is this improving customer loyalty? What are the business goals? Make sense? What are your goals? Why is it important? What's the urgency? Why do you have this urgency? Why? Because what you can say back when you have to tell them the cold, hard facts, you want to serve the cold, hard facts on an emotional bun, okay? Which is this: I understand your goals. I understand how urgent it is. And I repeat the goals. Did I get your goals right? And I'm committed to your goals, but I want to deliver these cold, hard facts. So I'll get on to the other rules now. 1, make a commitment you can keep or beat. Because the one question I teach executives to ask is this: can you finish earlier? Because if they can't finish earlier, there's no way they're going to finish on time. That makes sense? What's the fastest you can get to New York City? Let's assume, like midnight, 4 hours to center of Manhattan if there's no traffic, etc. What's the most likely how long to get to the center of Manhattan? Probably 6 hours, right? To be comfortable. And if you have a meeting that you really want to be there, leave the day before. I've gone in there before where it's just like, Escape from New York, it's not working. Kurt Russell, thank you. So how am I doing on time?
Great.
All right. Okay. Make commitments you can keep or beat. 2 problems. Most teams don't know how to estimate. So that's a skill to really develop, because you really can develop it with data, historical data, experience, etc. But I also want to say this: it's also a mindset thing. I have a lot of developers say they cannot possibly estimate something. And I prove them wrong almost instantly. Because I say, can you finish this by tomorrow? The answer is no. If you have 5 years of dedicated time, can you finish it within 5 years? Oh, hell yes. Okay, we just made an estimate. Okay, now let's narrow that range down. And what you don't want to tell the executives the earliest point you can finish. You want to tell them the most confident point you can finish. That gets on to point 3. Constantly improve your speed to value. Point 2. Focus on smart speed to value. And what I mean by smart speed to value, what's really the fastest way to get to Manhattan? Right. And you really want to get there fast, what do you need? Parachute, helicopter, military, jet escort. The options are continuously escalate the price. But here's what developers usually don't do. Give management options. Give management options. You've got to give them options. And that is, what can you not do to make you go faster? By the way, this is a brilliant agile principle. I agree with it. What are the things we can drop and still have a really magnificent, good product, get value there as fast as possible? What can we not do? By the way, my next book is going to be Leading with Speed. It talks about all these types of things in a lot more detail. Best talent, even if you have to acquire it. you know, if you have to hire an expert consultant, somebody that knows what are your web things, Drupal really well, or some of the back-end stuff, or any of those things. Get the best person in the world. They can help you go faster. They've done it 20 times already. They can help you go faster. Get the best talent possible. The minimum wow product. I know it's called minimum valuable or minimum viable product. I've seen that too often be the minimal boring product. So try to avoid that. Acquire technologies, tools, etc. Blah, blah, blah. Anyways, mainly give management options for speed. That's rule 3. Rule 4, deliver high quality. I don't care if the executive never asked about it. By the way, one of the books I wrote, this is free on my website. A hard copy, this is my last one. I can make hard copies. They're a little expensive. Anyway, this is on my website, but it's 100 plus questions that executives should be asking to lead teams to build smart, aggressive project plans. By the way, somebody asked me, why did I write this? Somebody? Thank you. You know, it's funny. I'm a consultant. I think I'm brilliant at it, but I constantly I'm dumb about some things. I kept on telling this one executive, all you ask about is schedule. How many people, most of the managers just ask about schedule? Oh, not too bad? Yours does, yeah. Most managers just ask about schedule. And I kept telling the manager, you got to ask more questions, different types of questions. He finally said to me, Alan, I don't know what questions to ask. 100 plus questions. A lot of managers, by the way, you can give this to your managers. A lot of managers keep this in their drawer and they review it. There's things in here like, how do I go smart and fast? What's my customer focus? How am I finding out I'm delivering the right product at the right time? Do I really have a smart focus on quality? These types of things. So anyways, it has to work, it has to be safe, it has to be secure, because no executive wants to be in those headlines. And no executive, even if your problems don't make the headlines, don't want to be slowed down, because each one of these, by the way, is a huge detriment to organizational speed. How many people at Fiat are now having to deal with those software problems when they could be developing the next level of safety features for the vehicles? How many people at Facebook be fixing their data privacy problems as opposed to dealing with this latest fiasco, et cetera, et cetera? Executives are depending on the quality, and they do not want you to take shortcuts, even though it sounds like they're telling you to. Number 4, constantly improve your speed to value. So 1, understand the executive situation and goals. 2, focus on smart speed to value. 3, I had 2 of them together. No wonder I had 2 number 2s. By the way, I remember now, in my slide deck, I actually do have a slide deck. I have married together, make commitments you can keep with the speed to value, because those 2 are really married for executives. I separate them because it's easier to talk about them, but you need to be able to interchange them and talk to them, because whatever executives ask you about schedule, they're asking you about both things simultaneously. Are you going as fast as possible, and are you making a commitment you can keep? You need to separate those in your answers, even though they're asking both things simultaneously. Constantly improve your speed to value and be able to prove it with data. This is a hard thing. I'm doing a lot of work on this with some organizations now, but how do you measure software productivity? This is a really hard thing to do, but it can be done. I'm not going to go in that tonight, but if you can master that, you really can be so expert and competent to your executives. Does that make sense? So, quick time check, I have 2 more things.
Yeah, you've comfortably got 10, 15 more minutes, yeah.
Okay, well, I'll be comfortable then. Okay. So any questions before I go on to this next part? Because I want to sort of summarize this and then do one more thing. Any questions about this? Any challenges? I like fights. I like people disagreeing with me. Go!
So, one of your points a moment ago, and you've got to excuse me, I've had an old-fashioned some a little bit. You spoke about how you shouldn't ever falter on quality when you're delivering something, if you're an engineer.
Yeah.
Is that to say, when you're estimating to an executive, you should be estimating like, okay, you could have feature X, or you could have, and it won't be as good, or you could have feature Y, which isn't quite what you need, but we know that we can produce feature Y at the utmost quality.
Okay, let's talk about what we mean by quality, because this is a tough one. First, let's do the very basic one. No defects. Are we okay with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, no defects. And by the way, also, I would say this, no technical debt. People okay with that? Let me go on for just that one for a minute. Because you can have a feature that has no defects and have technical debt in it because you took a lot of shortcuts that violate the architecture, bad design practices, but get the feature out there to the customers. What have you just done to the company? Oh, brilliantly said. What's your name? Jesse. I'll remember that. Wasted their future time. And that's exactly it. And by the way, if you moved on, you even wasted them more time because somebody else is going to be picking up the code and wondering, why? Whoa. So there's going to be a lot of pressure to take shortcuts like that or defects. So that's what, when I talk about quality, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the polish, by the way, of the iPhones. Brilliantly designed. And yes, Android has very much caught up, in some ways surpassed, but Apple really knocked the ball out of the park when they launched that thing. By the way, they talk about software productivity. They didn't give a hell about productivity. They had 4 different design teams competing with each other. You know what I mean? They weren't looking at doing this cheap. They put massive effort into making it design. So they were really going for high quality polish. But they didn't do so good on the high quality, no defects. So that's my distinction. Are you okay with that so far? Yeah. Okay. So when I talk about quality, I'm talking about that, it works, it's safe, it's secure. You can negotiate on how good it is from a user's perspective. Whether or not, it has a brilliant graphical user interface that's completely intuitive, or you went back to the 80s and had, dot matrix kind of printout. You can negotiate on those kind of things. Did I answer your question?
I might talk to you afterwards.
Okay, very good. I do have to leave at 7:15 so I can get home for the fireworks. But I'll be back. Any other questions? So I have a handout here. By the way, it's also an offer, which I'll make, but I want to talk about the be exceptional part. Patch a bunch to the back. Oh, I better keep one. Thanks. So this is sort of a summary of the other 5 points with one of the points being 2 points. You can make the biggest difference on a team. What I've really found that is, if you follow sports teams, for example, LeBron James really, for example, in the NBA carried the Cleveland, what are they? I forgot. That's how close I follow that. Cavaliers, thank you. Cleveland Cavaliers to the NBA Finals. Stephen Curry for the Golden State Warriors really is the inspiration soul of that team in a lot of ways. There's a lot of teams where you find out that there's individual that really can be exceptional and bring the whole team to higher levels. I have found that in sports, and I give lots of examples, but I can also show you in a lot of the teams I worked with where there's an exceptional individual that really makes the whole team rise up. And so what I'm talking about with these points, by the way, takes a couple parts. One, it takes skills. It does take the ability to be able to actually make reasonably good estimates. But it also takes a lot of courage. Does that make sense? Courage. Because a lot of times the executives are really going to be very unhappy to hear what it really takes. I'm unhappy with my web developer right now because it's more expensive and taking longer than I would like. Because I wanted it, once I conceived of my new website, should have been done 2 months before I had the idea. What's that? Yeah, it's just software. This should be easy. I had this vague idea, and it was beautiful. Handle it. So it takes courage to stand up to the executives, and the executives are extraordinarily busy. They're under a lot of pressure, and they're spending a lot of money to do these types of things. So there's really a push. So what I'm calling for is to be exceptional. And one of the things I developed over time was this wheel you see on the back. It's on my website. I give you the URL so you can see. I've written a small newsletter about each of these quadrants. And I see I should have used cardstock. Oh well. But just a few of these things. To be exceptional is these things I talked about, and there's a few other pieces that really is talking about, one, a mad focus, a relentless focus on value to your customers. Keeping your team driven toward that, keeping your executives focused on that, and knowing that you're focused on that is huge. And there's a few other pieces here. You really need all these pieces to be exceptional. Mad good skills, by the way, is what people mostly think needs to be exceptional. And by the way, I've taught in lots of developers in a methodology called the personal software process. Not very famous, but it actually measures stuff very well. It's based on how people do their work, and they try out a few different techniques of estimating and quality, et cetera. And one of the things we found out is, one, is that everybody can get better. Once they have data, they can get better, and they do. Two, I found out that there are extraordinarily better programmers than others, mad good skills. And for example, there's this one program, Gaussian elimination in mathematics, that they had to write, and most people wrote about 1,000 lines of code to solve this problem in Java. Then somebody handed me a program that was about 20 lines of code. I was like, oh, this got to be wrong. It wasn't. It was brilliant. I went through it. And no, she didn't find it on a website. She just wrote it because I started to run into, like 1 out of 100 people. I taught about 500. And I ran into 5 of these scary. Good. They stare at the wall and they write 10 lines of code. It's immaculate. So there can be mad good skills. It can be differential. But everybody can get better. So mad good skills is just part of it. The other part, though, is this relentless focus to make your teammates better, to drive everybody to a higher level. And that's where I've really seen people, there's stories about that in my book, by the way, about where, one of the people really found one of his teammates was failing, and he had to develop 3 of the skills that are in my book. One was the courage to hold teammates accountable. 2, the ability to tell people the truth. 3, the ability to tell people the truth and make a positive difference where they actually act and change and say thank you. These are all the types of skills you need. So, by the way, here's an offer. It's almost on my website, but my website's not ready yet. I'm putting together a class, and you can read all about this here. And I have a special offer for this group. If people are interested and could commit by Monday of next week, I'll do it just for $500, which is $400 less than here. So, any other closing questions about this or anything else before I do my big wrap? Okay, big wrap. Engineering is cool. How many people love doing this kind of stuff? This is great. Engineering is cool. So really, love the career, do it with passion, and please do good in the world. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, everyone, we're going to take a quick break. I think we'll do maybe like 10 minutes or so. Alan, thanks so much for your talk. How can we get in touch with you again?
Oh,
You have a website? Well,
I do.
we'll bring that up.
I do have a website. Oh. AlanWillet.com. I'll hand out my card to everybody.
Awesome. Thank you. And what's the name of your book again? You had a couple out in the beginning, but it's
Leading the Unleadable.
Leading the Unleadable. Find out more about Alan.
Yeah.
It's great. Cool. Awesome. All right. Do 10 minutes. Make sure you get drinks.
Hey, good to see you again.
Pizza, all that stuff. And then we're going to have the next talk on peer-to-peer technologies in 10 minutes or so.
Oh, my email's on there too.
So the benefits and drawbacks of that are you can own the data you want, which is a really good thing. You can access it whenever you want, offline or online. Kind of a mini drawback with that is if you're using an automatic syncing network, peers can use a good amount of disk space if they're actually storing content on your computer, if you're giving them permission to. Another benefit is you don't need to be online constantly, which is really nice. But it can create long download times when you're doing that initial sync or when you're going back online when you haven't been on in a while. And then another really good part of it is because this is all still a relatively new field, everything is very open source, everything is very like, people are looking for active involvement, and people are looking for, people are excited to offer a transparent community. And there aren't very many bad actors or exploited systems. There's certainly the potential, just like there was with the client-server model, but the fact of the matter is that everything is still pretty new and exciting. It feels a lot like the internet of the 90s, and it's exciting. Yeah. Any questions about local first? Yeah. Right, that's a good question. It's taking the ideas of the local first, as in like, you have your content, can modify it whenever you want. The only connection you need is when you're syncing it. But the problem with that is that Google and Dropbox have full access to those files. They can do whatever they want with them. They can, you know, I made this in Google Slides, and they can analyze it for whatever they want. A true local first version of that would be like would be an instance of Google Drive that was on this computer, but that you all could access and download and upload content to. It would be, this computer would be the peer, and then anyone connecting to it would be the other peers in the network. So, what's that? Exactly. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Any other questions? Sure. The technology issue would just come into play when it came to like, the way I see it, it would be like, if I wanted to start my own Google Drive, what would be the repo I would go to and clone and start running on my computer here? You know what I mean? It would be like, what's the actual software I get up and running? But that's a really good point that those local first systems are in place with bigger players like Google and Dropbox, and only really differentiated because those are bigger corporate players. Yeah, exactly. Yep, GitHub is a really good example of that too. exactly. Yep. Yeah. And I think kind of the big point about local first stuff is you can spin up your own instance of something, you can make your own rules for it, you can do your own hosting for it, and you can walk away with the data at the end of the day without necessarily ever having given it to someone else or having it in someone else's care. So. I don't know, that's a good question. So the question was, how does MediaWiki and the ability to create your own wiki, host it yourself? You know, just talking it through, because with MediaWiki, what you can do is download the software, spin up an instance on your server, and then run it as if it's a full Wikipedia. It's got all the interface that people are used to and the full, edit history and that kind of thing. And it seems like that fits pretty well into local first because it is open software that gives you control of your data. That's a good question, though. But yeah. To go on with another type of peer-to-peer decentralized technology, federated peer-to-peer, kind of takes the benefits of client-server and self-hosted models and combines the best parts of both of them. So one analogy that I tend to go to is, how many people have heard of Mastodon, the social network? A couple people. So basically Mastodon is like, it's got the same kind of limitations as Twitter. Any tweet will have to have, no more than 500 characters. You can have an image attached to a tweet, all that kind of thing. But you can download and start your own instance of Mastodon on your own server. And the nice thing about that is that you can set your own rules for the community. You can connect your instance of Mastodon to other instances of Mastodon and so on. Twitter is kind of like one instance of its own social network. It says like, it's kind of like Twitter is a single room that everyone has to interact in, and Twitter's algorithm is listening to your interactions the whole time and building your experience for you based on how you use it. So basically, it's going to give you the post that it thinks you will click on to generate more time spent on Twitter, to generate more ads seen, to generate more money for Twitter. With Mastodon, however, it's saying, okay, you can have a space to talk to other people in, but you have to run the server for it. We'll give you the software to run the server for it, and from there, you can decide your own rules, and you can, won't have the ability to put up ads, but that also means that you're gonna see tweets in a chronological order, not sorted for you by an algorithm that you don't have any real control over. You're not gonna see material kind of filtered and curated for you based on getting you to stay on the site, based on getting you to see more ads. It's kind of similar to how Slack works, how you can have different spaces on Slack with the same account. Those spaces can interact with each other in the sense that I can be in more than one Slack channel at a time, and a server will maintain its own data. That's the difference from how Slack works, because they're all a centralized system. Oh, you cannot see that. This is just a quick little illustration. This one isn't that important because it's kind of hard to see. And it's hard to see this too, but this is a map of the world. And all of the little dots around all of the little continents are individual Mastodon instances. Compared to Twitter, which is just one big instance encompassing all of its users, Mastodon instances can be started up by anybody, have their own rules, be in a language, or be around a topic that's familiar to the people involved, and so on. Some other examples that I don't think we have time to get into right now, not quite, are Peertube and Scuttlebutt. So Peertube is similar to YouTube, but you can spin up your own instance of it, and then it combines with a technology called peer-to-peer swarm, which we'll talk about in a minute, to reduce hosting costs to make it so that you can actually seed the videos you're watching from your browser without downloading any extra software to bring down the hosting costs and the network requirements for the host running it. So we'll talk about that in a sec because that's a really cool one. Scuttlebutt is another example. It's a social network designed for offline first. I think it was designed by people who spend most of their time sailing, and they wanted a social network that they could tap into when they came back to the mainland for a little bit, had a night at a hotel or something like that, and then go back out for another couple months and flip through all the posts that they missed. It's a really cool story, and the end result ends up being that you get kind of an offline Facebook that you have to be online maybe like once every 2 or 3 months to use with in a way that's enjoyable. So the benefits of a federated system are that servers can maintain control over their own data because they're spinning up instances for themselves. Users can find communities that better suit them. When I joined Twitter, I kind of look around and see like, okay, who do I want to follow? There's so many people, I don't know where to start. Maybe I'll start with a celebrity or something like that, or Luke Jones probably. And then, but with Mastodon, I could look for a web developer Mastodon, or a game developer Mastodon, or a vegan Mastodon, or whatever I was interested in, and use that as my jumping off point and have a community with whom I'll have more in common with to start with. And then federated servers also have the authority, reach, and convenience of a central server. You don't have to spin up your own instance of Mastodon and own your own server to be able to use the social network. You can join an existing one, which is a really nice bonus because with local first data, you kind of have to own and run everything yourself. You kind of have to be the one who's ultimately responsible for everything, and not everybody has time for that. Main drawbacks of this are it's an unfamiliar system to most users. I still don't quite get Mastodon, and I feel like a lot of people I talk to go like, yeah, I've heard of it, but what does that exactly mean? I'm not totally sure. And then it still requires central hosts. It still requires that connection to a third party that might not necessarily have your best interest. But again, since this is a relatively newer, less populated field, there's fewer bad actors in it right now. All right, the final kind of protocol, kind of method of communicating that I want to talk to with peer-to-peer technology is the swarm. This is the one that most people are familiar with when they think of going on Kazaa or BitTorrent or anything like that and downloading information from a lot of people while seeding that information to a lot of people as well. It's people connected to a single source sharing a set of data. So a user is both a client and a server, which kind of evens the playing field, because you remember we were talking about how the server had the ultimate authority over everything. And if the cord was cut to the server, that's it for the service. It won't exist anymore. With a swarm, every single client, so if there are 60 clients connected to all downloading the newest Star Wars movie or something like that, if one of those are cut off, there are 59 other server clients, what have you, ready to go right off the bat. They seed or send data to others requesting that same information. So you're receiving data and then you're making copies of it and continuously sending it to other people. BitTorrent and WebTorrent are really good examples of this. If you haven't heard of WebTorrent, it's the coolest thing. It's BitTorrent in your browser. And I'll show you an example of this in a second here. Oh, right here. So if you go to webtorrent.io, this is the thing you see. You're going to be streaming a 130 megabyte movie and downloading it from, what is it here, 8, 9, 10, whatever peers, not their central server, but the other people that are actually watching it. You're grabbing the information from them. You're running a torrent client in your browser without having to download any extra hardware. And then when you finish downloading the video, you start seeding it. You start sending it to other people as well. So here's that 130 megabyte video I've got alive in my browser right now, and I'm sending it to 16 other people, and they set it up with a little cool diagram so you can see the IP addresses of those people. And I'm sending that to them right from my browser. You used to have to download a lot of, kind of sketchy software to be able to torrent like this. But now there's the technology to do it right from your browser, right as soon as you land on a site. And really, the people accessing it don't need to know any of the tech behind it, just that it works. Advantages of a swarm are that it's much less hierarchical, like we were talking about, than the client-server model. There's redundancy built in a huge way. The whole system is based on everyone being able to share content instead of reaching into a single source, getting that content and holding it for yourself and no one else ever. There's no single point of failure because of that redundancy. And there's better download speed for popular content because you can reach in and grab it from several different sources at once and find the best, fastest uploaders to get your content. Some disadvantages are a slower propagation time. If you've ever used Bitcoin, made transactions with Bitcoin, you know that it can take a little while to propagate across the network. That's because there's so many peers that need to sync to the latest version. With the client-server model, you have that one central source of authority, but with this, you have so many that need to all be individually updated, saying like, hey, John just bought 2 Bitcoin, hey, John just bought 2 Bitcoin, and they have to keep on running around until everyone's all up to date. There are larger demands on battery and network traffic, which is a big deal when you think about mobile devices. Since so much of the internet now is built on specifically for mobile devices, you have to think about how quickly you're going to run over data plans, a monthly set amount, if you're constantly uploading like you would be on a peer-to-peer network, on a swarm. You would need a steady internet connection like you have in a room. So pretty much you would need a stable desktop computer. And then there's the question of authenticity. You need to find popular torrents or popular sources to make sure that you're getting the right thing, and the right thing without any extra things, extra spyware, extra malicious software attached to it. So now I want to run through a little checklist of some apps that are up and running and ready to use for peer-to-peer technology. Any questions on any of the methods that we just talked about, though? Yeah.
So there's, you addressed the entity, but also like in America, most of the, like you said, like if it changes, like who owns the current, most recent version?
Exactly.
Spread around everywhere. And if something goes wrong, who do you blame?
Exactly. Yep.
I got fucked, and then I have to find out responsible.
Yeah.
And then it's all of the people like, how do we address that?
So, yeah, I'm not sure about how it happens on big torrent sharing networks. If anyone knows that, feel free to jump in. But I know that when it comes to smaller, like for example, the one I'm about to talk about, the Beaker Browser uses the DAT network, which is another peer-to-peer protocol, just like torrent. The way they do it is by doing single writer append-only logs, which is like when I start a DAT repository here on my computer, I'm the only one, this computer is the only one that can write to it, and I can only add to it. I can never go back and change it. So the way they've chosen to handle it is by saying you can make additions from one device and that's it. They're working on other changes like multi-writer capabilities and that kind of thing, but I think that's one of the big problems when it comes to especially swarm handling, like what's the authoritative version, how do we fix conflicts and that kind of thing, so I don't really have a good answer for that. That's a great question though. So the first app I want to talk about is the Beaker Browser, a fully functional browser built on Chromium, which is the same engine Chrome uses, with support for the DAT protocol, which is basically a version of Torrent. I think it was originally designed for scientists publishing large amounts of data like machine learning data and that kind of thing, but they figured out that it was really good for making little snapshots just like Git commits that you could create and share in a peer-to-peer way very easily. You can publish and host DApp-based websites from the browser in Beaker, which is pretty cool to see in action. And then you can save all files from a DApp site for offline use. And I'll show you a quick demo of that at the end here. This is ideal for beginning HTML and JavaScript and CSS developers. Web developers in here, do you remember getting your first website online on your own server, not on something like GeoCities or anything like that? It is so difficult. It was so hard to figure out what exactly people meant by, SSH into the server and upload it, or spin up a Heroku instance, or whatever it might have been at the time. It's very easy with Beaker, and the lower we can make that point of entry, the more people can publish websites, and the more perspectives we can get online, the more unique individual websites we'll be able to get, just like we had at the start of the presentation. It's really good for quick site prototyping and file sharing, and it's also really good for accessing sites with the DApp protocol, both online or offline, which ends up being super handy. Mastodon, which we talked about a little bit, I won't talk about too much. It's a Twitter clone. You can easily find or create new communities. Really good for organizations looking for a self-hosted Twitter or Slack replacement. And really good for users looking for more specialized interests or smaller communities and less potential harassment, spam, and bots and that kind of thing than Twitter has. Secure Scuttlebutt, SSB, is another protocol that we talked about. Social network, the closest equivalent to them is Facebook. They're a bit longer blog posts kind of things than Mastodon or Twitter. Heavily focused on offline capability. There's a really big community. There's a lot of different channels and different topics of conversations, and it's the most diverse peer-to-peer community I've seen. A lot of these are like maybe a dozen people who are all developers working on the software too, so most of the conversation is about peer-to-peer stuff. But on Scuttlebutt, it looks like people have lives beyond open source software, which is fun sometimes. Patchwork is the most common client, and it's ideal for people with users with unreliable or intermittent connections. It's perfect for those users. You only have to be online once in a while. And then users looking for more mature, active, varied social network in the peer-to-peer sphere. Peertube, like we talked about, again, I won't talk too much about this. You can spin up an instance, and then using the WebTorrent technology that we saw earlier, viewers will seed the video that they're watching to other people who are watching that video, which will reduce your server costs in the end, which is great for organizations looking to host high-demand videos cheaply and organizations looking to maintain more control over videos than YouTube allows. There's kind of a big flap lately when Blender, the 3D modeling software, had all of its videos pulled from YouTube because they wouldn't monetize their channel. They were such a big channel, getting so many views, but they're an open source software organization, so they said, we don't want to run ads on it. That's counter to our nature. We're not going to do that. And YouTube, it's kind of unclear whether it was like a managerial mistake or what, but they pulled all their videos for a few weeks, and Blender said, forget it. We're going to start Peertube. We're going to start our own instance. We'll host the videos, but then people can seed it to each other and share it. And that ended up working out really well for them. Some smaller services that I want to touch on. For any developers here who use NPM, there's a service called PNPM. I don't know what the first P stands for. I should have looked that up. It's got more efficient disk usage and ability to symlink the node modules you use in an individual project to an authoritative single instance of it. So you only have to download the package once. If you're used to NPM installing Lodash every project, then you've got 100 versions of Lodash on your computer. But with PNPM, you only need one, which ends up saving you a lot of space in the long run. HyperGit is a decentralized Git remote. Talking about GitHub being a being in the end a really centralized service that has a lot of control over your data. HyperGit is a good replacement for it because with that I could start Git remote here on my computer, give access to all of you, and then we could have a project, a full Git repo without having to touch GitHub at all. Cabal is a really cool one. It's fun. A peer-to-peer chat in the command line and with mobile devices too. And these three are all available on NPM, and I'll post the link to the slides of this after the talk. And then there's instant.io, which is in-browser sharing using WebTorrent. That's pretty cool. You upload a copy of the file you want to share to your browser, send someone else a link to it, and then they paste the link in instant.io on their end, and it moves from your browser to their browser. It doesn't have to touch any third-party service, doesn't have to be stored in Dropbox or anywhere else. It ends up being complete control over your data once again. There's a DApp-based shopping list. That's really cool. And then there's Inoki, which is a web or a publishing tool that you can use for DAT sites. And those are really good in the Beaker browser especially, which I'll show you an example of in a second. And then there's WebTorrent, which we've been talking about kind of throughout here, in-browser peer-to-peer swarm client, which you can just add in and start using to any project. So the final kind of takeaway I want you to have is some of the philosophy behind peer-to-peer stuff, behind the peer-to-peer world. There are a few points here kind of adapted from Tara Vansel and Paul Frazee, who are the main people behind the Beaker project. And I want to just read them one by one. I think they're all very important and touch on everything really well. Publishing should be easy and accessible to all, ideally free, ideally one click, ideally you can, if you took a week and learned HTML, you could get and run your website right away. View source is critical to an open web. The more code the users can read, the more they can review and learn from. The more code that's black boxed away into a PHP server that the user's never going to see and never going to understand, the less they'll understand and the less diverse our services will be able to be. Modify source is the peer-to-peer web's really exciting, great power. A web that can be made and remade by its people can better serve their needs and produce a more diverse and exciting world. We don't have to get a boardroom of Twitter executives telling us what we need here in Ithaca, just like people in any other part of the world, any other city, don't need like people in far-off centralized services deciding what they need, deciding what's good for them. And finally, the peer-to-peer web should still be the web. Make it better, don't remake it. Recognize that the web is a really exciting achievement, that feeling of sharing and creating and modifying content that we were was familiar from those little shots of those 90s websites that we all felt back then is a really integral part of this experience and a really exciting thing that we should work to preserve because it's a beautiful thing. And that's all I got. So thank you.
So anyone have any questions for Sander?
Yeah.
Sander, I'm a rude and have to run, but I just wanted to say thank you. It was brilliant. I'm happy to see the Rebel Alliance is alive. that the Jedi Knights such as you are fighting a good fight. I do have questions, but I will catch you later.
Sounds good.
I go see the fireworks.
Any other, yeah.
Yeah. I think that this all sounds great. I've been thinking about a lot of this stuff on my own.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't get over the idea that there's a huge technical hurdle for all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How are people going to start using this if they can't start their own like instance of Mastodon? Like
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out Mastodon either.
Right.
Like how is this stuff going to get you traction that having to use the command line to build
Exactly.
install stuff like beyond just
Yeah. So one of the more exciting things I've been watching happen on Scuttlebutt is people figuring out how to relay concepts to people who aren't neck deep in it already. Because when you're in it, it's awesome and exciting. When you're not, it's how do I spin up an instance of Mastodon? Why do I need to use the command line for it? This is a nightmare. Let me show you the Scuttlebutt site. They have a cool solution. And I won't play the whole video, but just for a second here, I want to show you, like, they do a good job starting to explain the content. Is there?
Is that coming up on projector?
This video, I'd like to introduce you to how
Yeah, it is.
one of the most important things to remember.
So the cool thing about Scuttlebutt is they have like a little story with a couple little characters who, you know, fall in love and eventually make friends, but then they break up. And it's a fun like story that kind of engages the user and makes it appealing right off the bat. They make it a point to like route all new users to this and to say like, watch this video first. Don't download anything until you've watched it. So like, it's exciting to see people looking to answer that, because I think that's one of the big hurdles too, you know?
So,
Oh yeah.
so no Mastodon hosting sites yet, or AWS marketplace images, or anything like that?
Say that again?
So there's no like hosting sites like, you know, for like WordPress, there's lots of companies out there.
Oh,
Go
I
and do
think-
it your own because they're hosting it for you.
I think there is one for Mastodon, at least one. I'm not sure what it is off the top of my head, but yeah, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but I think it's out there. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is kind of twofold.
Yeah.
I think to sort of carry on from your point, in my not so educated opinion, I think the only way to get good adoption would be for people not to have to worry about this. So for it to just happen in the background. So are there any apps like doing that?
Yes.
And they don't talk about it, it's just it does it.
Beaker. So check this out. So when I'm in Beaker, which is over here. Oh. Wait, sorry. All right, so Beaker is really good at it. So right now, if I go to beakerbrowser.com, whoops. It'll take me to the HTTPS site, which is the normal. This is client server. I'm the client reaching into the server for beakerbrowser.com saying, hey, send me your site. But Beaker has this cool little thing up here that says peer-to-peer version available. And so if I click on that, then I'm actually switching it over to dat://beakerbrowser.com instead of HTTPS. This is coming from the peers who are currently hosting on their computers, which it looks like there's 2 others right now. So they've kind of baked it in right from the start that like, if a site has a peer-to-peer version available, you can click a little button for it and access it. And they set it up so that when you're on the site, you're automatically seeding the files, and you can choose how long you want to do that for. So for example, all sites, DAT sites do seed while you're visiting. And then you can click on this and slide it up to, say, forever, and then you just download it to your computer, and you're seeding it whenever you have the Beaker browser open. Then it goes into your library, which is right here, beakerbrowser.com. Here's all the files that we were talking about. It's got everything available, and it's got it all available if I'm offline, too, which I think this is the really cool part of it. I'm not connected to the internet at all right now, but I can click around, and when they take me out of the site, it'll say, oh, you don't have an internet connection. But I can click around on the documentation, get all this info, get all the styling that they've done, everything. I have the files now, and I can do what I want with them. And Beaker made it so that I can fork the site, too. I won't do that right now, because I don't know how, but but the one other cool thing you can do is you can create a new website. You can set the title to IWP July 3rd. Add a favicon, it's a book. Set my local directory, so it's going to be in my user folder /sites/my website. Here are the files, and if any of you had the Beaker browser now, you could enter in this URL, which is a pretty ugly URL, but ends up being the only way it'll work for right now, and access the site, pull it from my computer to your computer, create a copy, seed it, share it, fork it, do whatever you want with it. So this is a fully functioning, real, hosted, live website. And we did it in like 2 seconds with a couple clicks of the button. That's cool, that's exciting. And they've kind of baked it into the browser right from the start. So yeah, to answer your question, Beaker is like the best at that right now. Yeah.
So originally you talked about, Facebook getting the data for money,
Yeah.
basically. So in the long run, how would people that spend thousands of hours working on developing this and maintaining this, I realize there's a lot of anger towards that level collection, and I'm sure there's very much improvement that needs to be made, but how do they expect to live?
How do the developers of this expect to? Yeah.
This becomes so right now, if you use Torrents, right, it's just basically people have websites where they post pirated movies and whatnot, and they make money from using the website and advertising, right? So if it comes to a point where this is all hosted by nobody making money, how is this going to run?
Yeah.
Right?
That's a good question. It's one that's really far off. So whenever I've heard that question be raised, in the peer-to-peer community, I see let's not worry about it right now. You know what I mean? Let's get the technology up and running. It's a good question to ask and an important one, but I think that's so far away.
I think one interesting way, because I've thought about that a lot, to think about this is especially with federated systems, I guess, is that right now, I think the music space is a really good example. If I wanted to go make some service that does something with music, where does music live? It's owned by Apple in iTunes, but it's also owned by Spotify, but it's also owned by Tidal, which nobody uses and is horrible. And it's also owned by, all these different places. And if you want something that's not something that's going to be creating music, but something that's going to be a tool that people interact with that uses music, you can't, because it's everywhere. It's in SoundCloud, and all of these things are all walled off, and you don't have access to it. And there's good reasons for that, because creators made that music originally, and they need to be paid and licensed and all that stuff. But when you think about it that way, it's the data for music should really would be better off being in a more distributed, federated system that is more like email, where it's a protocol. And I think in that system, the profit comes from there's nothing stopping someone from making something that is a great tool around that. Email is completely federated, so no one owns email. It's just a protocol, and then there's all these different services that use it. But Gmail has been one of the best to actually create a tool around that service, and they profit from it. And so that obviously Google is a massive corporation, so you don't want to advocate for that. But I think that idea is the protocol should exist, and the data should be, the important pieces should be in it, but there's still flexibility for people to create tools around it, and and people are incentivized to whoever makes the best tool can still profit from it in some way. But I don't know if the framework exists to actually solve that now, but maybe that's one answer.
Yeah, definitely. And then there's still the option for advertising, because if you think about it, especially with Mastodon, so many of them spin up around a particular topic. If it's going to be music or something, then they're going to advertise synthesizers or whatever it might be on that site. What's that?
But not specific.
Exactly. Not the hyper-tailored, I search for a boat and then all I'm going to be seeing for 3 weeks is boat ads kind of thing that's existing now. So. Yeah, right. They're like, oh, this is great, yeah. All right, any other questions?
Have you heard of Steemit?
Only in passing. Have you used it?
I've just played around a little bit with it, but it's like, it's kind of like a cryptocurrency-backed blogging
Oh,
website.
cool. Okay.
And there's content that you put on, and people can vote it up, and based on your votes, you get the cryptocurrency. And there's also sponsored content, which bring in money for the
that's interesting.
cryptocurrency.
Yeah,
So there's that kind of.
that's a cool idea. That's a good way to,
really cool idea to
yeah, kind of mix the two. Yeah,
for the service.
yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Yeah, that's where the money comes into decentralized tech, right? Bitcoin.
Right. Bitcoin. Yeah, that's cool though. No, I haven't ever used it, but that sounds like a really cool idea in theory. To check it out.
Steven is super interesting. Yeah, I don't know that much about it, but it's a good one. I was going to ask, one thing that I think is a huge obstacle is that, when I go to, Mastodon, I love the idea, and I'm just curious to get your opinion on how you think you solve this problem, but, I read about Mastodon, and I'm like, okay, I get it. I totally get it. It's it's a federated blog Twitter thing. Totally understand it. Then when I go to join it, I'm like, which one is the real Mastodon?
Right.
Okay, what's
Yeah.
the Mastodon I'm supposed
Right.
to join? Because if I'm just going to join any Mastodon, I'm like, how do I know that this isn't just some weird
Exactly.
one that's in a corner of the world that has 10 users and is
Right.
maybe hacked and going to put
Right.
I think that we're so built to be centered around centralized things.
Yeah.
That I don't even know how I still haven't joined Mastodon because of that exact problem. I
Right.
don't even know. I'm so stuck on the fact that there isn't one central Mastodon. So
Right.
I don't know. What do you suppose is the way to get around that? How do you explain to people that they're getting authentic data from the service, even though it may not be from
Yeah.
the one single centralized source?
Yeah, that is another big problem because we're so used to when I go to Twitter, I'm going to get Twitter. That's it. When I go to Facebook, I'm going to get Facebook. It'll be personalized for me, but not I won't have to do like John's talking about. Sorry.
The counterpoint to that, though, is you go to Facebook and you get Facebook, and you're like, oh, no.
Which is a good counterpoint. Yeah. The way they handle that on Scuttlebutt, Scuttlebutt has a similar system where it's kind of useless until you make connections with other people, either by knowing them and both using Scuttlebutt or signing up for a pub, which is their version of a federated server, which is an individual instance of it. So first of all, there's 5 terms that I just threw out that are totally alienating, and so there's a problem right to start with. But then they go, here's a few public pubs that you can join, and then they do please don't choose the first pub in the list. But then they all have URLs that look like this, and you're like, oh my God, that's a virus. And so it's that's a good question because it's it's so in that early adopter cutting edge phase that it's not accessible at all.
Please don't choose the first pub in the list. It's hilarious.
Right,
It's
exactly.
So fun.
It should have no entry as the first.
Exactly, yeah.
It should be randomized.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
we saw that.
Yeah, but no, that's a really good question. There are a lot of questions that still need answering, and that's part of the excitement of peer-to-peer tech right now is that stuff is up in the air and kind of up to the users, to the developers to define. But yeah.
Seems like a geographically based model has some advantages where you say you're going to join the Ithaca one.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where you know a lot of people.
Yeah.
And but then you have to get
I know people that are freshmen in college that use it.
Damn.
Really?
All right.
It's great. Yeah. Yeah, that's a demographic.
So I
Yeah.
had one other question, and it was because
Yeah.
we're mostly developers here, which is, there's like so many different protocols and stuff. I guess like what would be your advice if you're someone that's interested in this stuff and wants to help out with it? Because obviously we all talked about the problem of like it's not accessible to people, but
Right.
developers it's accessible to. So how can we all work on making it more accessible? But since there's so many, and there will probably continue to be like a million other protocols invented,
Yeah,
and they're all
yeah.
open source, and they all have a lot of different people working on them.
Yeah.
What's the methodology for just like trying to figure out how you can like help the
Yeah.
like system in general, you know?
So the way I did it was I started working with the Beaker Browser and Fritter, which is the Beaker Browser's Twitter clone. And that ended up teaching me the most about it. And from there I could go like, okay, here's what the DApp protocol does really well. You know, it's really good at like giving you individual files and very easily modifiable. It's like running a repo, but oh, let's take a look at Scuttlebutt and see how they differ. And oh, Scuttlebutt just gives you kind of an opaque database-like structure that I have to, you know, kind of trust the data is all there. So for me, it was just like jumping into the one that had like the clearest issues that needed help on GitHub and like figuring it out from there, you know what I mean? Which like I would recommend that and the Beaker Browser. They're super friendly, you know, super open and yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even talk about IPFS, which is a whole nother interplanetary file system. It's got the coolest name of them all, so I should have talked about that. But similar to DApp, but it's, you know, it's just more of like, there's so many protocols out there that that's a good question. So there's a lot going on. But yeah, cool. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. We're going to post the